Hello, Friday World Economic News. We'll start with EU states with the biggest deficits and debts. We're kind of going to start with the United Kingdom to start with and then go out to the Western world. I'll put the links here for the numbers because I don't know what Vimeo's doing with that funny shape thing. It's been a bit funny the last couple of days and I don't know what it's all about. Anyway, this one, the chart, the blue line bar down is Ireland, which is a bit of an anomaly, so we'll forget that. The darker orange one is Greece with a 10.5% of GDP budget deficit, which is an awful lot. 10.5% of GDP budget deficit. Next, in lighter orange, at 10.4% of GDP budget deficit is the United Kingdom, with Spain minus 9.2 and minus 9.1 for Portugal next door, and then the rest of them. But this is to give us the idea that the UK is in very dangerous company. Right, this is the confirmation by Eurostat of those statistics, on which the colourful chart number one was based on this government deficit, and we can see from 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 the UK budget deficit as a percentage of GDP has gone minus 3%, minus 5%, minus 11%, and now the minus 10% that it is, and that's an awful lot. Okay, and the big bit, the big borrowing, how much is stacked away in all those, adding up to a great amount of money being owed as a percentage of GDP, is 44% in 2008, going through 54%, 69% or 70%, and now, because it's 10% extra, 80% now. Again, a lot of money. Next this is Office of National Statistics. Yes, that's what it's called, chart. The one on the right, net debt, this is United Kingdom still, as a percentage of GDP, excluding the interventions with the banks. Now, going back to 1998, when Gordon Brown said he would never go above 40, and didn't when he was Chancellor, but I think it slipped through up through 40 when he was actually Prime Minister, and now has gone up through 60, and that's without the banks being put onto those, factored into that figure. 60 is a lot. Right, Euro-Pound exchange rate going back to 2006, where I would normally have mentally factored in 1.5 euro could be bought for a pound, and now it's about 1.15, a good 25-33% devaluation of the pound, which was meant to encourage exports. Next is inflation. It took a little tick down in this month, but still the CPI is 4%, with RPI and RPIX at 5.5%, which is quite high. Of course, because imports still have to be done, and with a weaker pound, it takes more pounds to import these things. Next one is chart rate of consumer credit. Now, I've put a little T in there. But this goes back to 1994, and you can see the T is a 10% minimum increase year over year, and that's from 1994 to 2005. The year-on-year increase in debt, credit of people in the United Kingdom was over 10%, sometimes up 18%. Year-on-year increase in the amount of debt being taken on. But you can see from 2004 till now, it's come right down, and now it's a manageable, sort of sensible 1% increase year on year. But all that debt that has been taken out is still there on the books of the people that have borrowed it, and the books of the people that they have borrowed it from. Yesterday's release of GDP in the United Kingdom, 1.8% increase yearly, annualized from the first quarter of 2011, which is at the bottom of that yellow area at 0.5. So it would be 0.45 because you'd multiply it by 4 to annualize it, 4 quarters, 0.45, 0.9, 1.8 is the annualized for the first quarter of 2011. But look right the way back to 2009. Minus 0.8, minus 0.3, plus 0.5, plus 0.2, 1.1. Hooray! Plus 0.7, minus 0.5, and this one at plus 0.5. Piss poor. All that money has been thrown at it, and that's what you get for it. Nearly nothing. This article next is by Jeremy Warner from The Telegraph, and it's an older one. I've been wanting to use it for a while, 21st of April. He starts, even the row of terraced houses in northwest London where I live, this is what Jeremy's talking about, managed to put the housing crash behind it, these relatively modest late Victorian properties, etc., etc. What he's saying is, in where he lives in London, the prices have at least held on and have in some way, some places, increased. But later in the article he talks of going up to the northeast where prices have dropped in some areas 30 to even 60%. And this is what I wanted to point out from this. This is, I think, what we're going to get in the future in the whole of the Western world. Some people are going to do all right. Call it luck. They'll keep their job. They live in the right place, whatever it might be. But most of the rest of the population are going to get crushed one way or another. And this next chart is the consumer confidence in the United Kingdom index score, and a year ago it was minus 16 and now it's minus 31. This is because this is representative of the entire population of the United Kingdom. And most of the people in the United Kingdom are being crushed, and they're starting to feel it. They know what is going down, and they will not be borrowing money going forward. Believe me. Don't believe Cameron. Believe me. So, leave the UK behind us and go across the Atlantic to the United States. And this no, it's not Merrill. It's Morgan Stanley, of course. Wouldn't be Merrill. Strategic defaults. Now, these curves going out are the different years of mortgages that were taken out and how likely it is that they will strategically default. It's an interesting one that the defaults are so high, and it's to point out really that strategic defaults come because you have non-recourse mortgages, whereas most places, other places in the world, Europe especially, have recourse mortgages, and these of course keep the people crushed into having to pay their mortgages, and that obviously money goes to the mortgages, can't go to consumer spending. But the central banks are trying to keep the interest rates as low as possible to keep as much money as possible in the consumer's pocket, so GDP can at least creep along in positive territory. But of course this crushes the banks. And from yesterday's Bernanke extravaganza, GDP projection for 2011, these are the renewed ones, these are the new ones. GDP 3.3 down from 3.9, the new projection, which is bad. Unemployment 8.7 down from 8.9, which is good. He thinks unemployment's going to be slightly better, but that's US unemployment, and it's a nonsense. So many people dropping off the figures. Inflation, quite a radical shift. 2.8 up from 1.7. So he thinks there's a lot of more inflation is going to come in because of what we talked of yesterday, commodity pricing. Finish with this one. ECB Stark says debt. Oh, it isn't. I've got one more. I should have. Yeah. ECB Stark says debt restructuring risks starting a crisis exceeding Lehman. This is to bring in Europe. We've done the UK, the US. Now this is just to bring in Europe. European Central Bank Chief Economist Jürgen Stark said a debt restructuring by a euro country risked triggering a bank crisis that could, worst case, exceed the effects of the failure of Lehman. This is acceptance that there are so many debts out there that can't and won't be paid. Nobody wants to be the first domino to fall. But then they'll be labelled the one that caused it, like Lehman, whatever it might be. So nobody wants to cause the first debt default, just in case it starts a catastrophe off. But that's always lurking in the economic background for the whole Western world. FT Alphaville this morning, Japan's stunning stats. Thursday showed a far sharper plunge in March industrial production than the consensus 10.6%, a whopping 15.3% fall from February. That's in industrial production, while March's household spending slid an annual 8.5%. This is, how can I explain this? It's just about all deflationary. It's deflationary. It's a huge deflationary ghost spectre haunting the whole Western economic world. But, as Grantham pointed out yesterday, it could be, even though there is this spectre everywhere, that people will have to pay extra money for commodities. So you've got the extra money needed to pay for commodities and money to pay the debts back. The whole thing is unsustainable because there isn't enough money. So we've been through this so many times before. So what can happen? There has to be defaults on the debts, but that can't be because people fear it too much. Or there has to be inflation to try and inflate the debts away, because we can forget growing out of the debts by earning more money through growth. So inflation is the only way out, but the central banks and treasuries and governments are just not finding a way to get enough money into the economies so that debts can be inflated away. All that's happening is it's making life more difficult because commodity prices are going up. Anybody that thinks this is simple is simple. It is horrendously complicated, and the central banks, treasuries and governments are doing everything they can to stop this falling apart. But everything is just temporary in nature because the forces are pushing back stronger and stronger against them. But the main thing is it's deflationary because there are debts out there that will not be paid. And things like that. Okay, good weekend. See you next week. Bye.